A journey towards establishing a solid identity and the terror of not knowing oneself are the messages Wildcat Falling by Mudrooroo delivers. The novel is a story of a young man who must fight against a schism or a division in himself that makes his sense of identity frail and him dangerous to himself and to others. He flirts with a life of abandoned dreams and goals and denies the gift of his intellect. We learn that a person can be their own worst enemy and a firm identity is a stabilising influence. Written by Colin Johnson, or Mudrooroo, which means paperbark, the novel was the first in Australia to be written by a man of Indigenous blood. It is a novel that reads autobiographically, but in fact it is not. It is classed as fiction. It has been reported that Mudrooroo did grow up in Western Australia, did spend time in prison as a youth, and was sent to a Catholic orphanage, and is of mixed ancestry. Similar experiences to the narrator, but the novel still remains fictional. Instead of returning to prison as the narrator does at the end of the novel, Mudrooroo appears to have found his feet in life. He was a young man in his 20s when this novel was published. Wildcat Falling is a story, as the title suggests, of the cat that almost failed to land on its feet. The narrator's story becomes fiction, as it is the alternative path the author could have taken, the worst manifestation of the author's mistakes in life. This is, of course, just speculation, as the novel is classed as fiction. A falling cat is an apt description of the narrator's situation in life, and the motif of the cat occurs numerous times in the novel, meaning many things. But the cat in the title, the falling cat, suggests the narrator's lack of certainty in life, of the limbo he finds himself in. He falls due to the consequences of his mistakes, such as belonging to the bodgies and his criminal actions. But by falling, he discovers his writing mechanism. He learns of an innate power within him, just like the cat. A cat has a natural writing mechanism that allows it to land on its feet when it falls, and the title suggests, Wildcat Falling, that this is something the narrator can rely on. We find out later that this writing mechanism is related to his ancestors and the acknowledgement of his Indigenous blood. If he hadn't have fallen, he might never have discovered this power. The narrator always had the ability to return to his home, to the identity he owns. Cats also reportedly can find their way home over long distances due to a homing beacon that humans do not have. Wildcat Falling is a story about this homing beacon in action. No one can deny the protagonist this innate part of himself, his heritage, and this is the lesson the rabbit trapper man teaches him. The rabbit trapper man explains why the man has the falling cat nightmare. He tells him the story about a crow that deceived a cat into thinking it could fly without wings. He warns the man about the trickster archetype, the crow, and how it led the cat to believe it could be something it was not. The story cautions the man that he needs to accept himself as he is and stop being the crow that tricks himself, to stop being his own worst enemy. The message of the novel is that it does not matter so much what we appear to be externally, that we are more than our skin and shouldn't be bound by terms such as half Indigenous, etc., because a person is not half of anything. As such, it is ironic that in later life, Mudrooroo's Indigenous heritage was called into question and he was accused of not having Aboriginal blood. What Wildcat Falling demonstrates is that it does not matter if he does or does not have Indigenous blood, because the story within this novel is of a man who grew up with the experience of being of a mixed race, with Indigenous blood that made him feel different from others and discriminated against. Those who question his heritage make a mockery of the whole point of the novel, which is that no one else can dictate to you who or what you really are. It is not a mistake that the narrator remains nameless throughout the novel. This can mean many things, but one interpretation could be that there is no name for the race he belongs to. He cannot claim himself to be white or black, and in this way, the nameless narrator is a comment on the limitations that labels create. Just as Shakespeare asked many centuries ago, "What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." The nameless narrator calls into question the labels society is so fond of. Perhaps because the narrator is in fact just a part of the author's own self, Mudrooroo could not name his protagonist as separate from himself. Just as the Indigenous heritage was always within him, so too is this deeply authentic, troubled narrator. It is always a part of himself.